Hello, Africa. Welcome to the first Africa Data Session Conference. My name is Michael Yashini, and I'm hosting this event. And today's day one, the first day of this event. As we said earlier on, we follow the conversation. So, objective of this event is to set an agenda, working by the for building a world-class cybersecurity and test out and protecting infrastructure system institutions across Africa with the view of engendering sustainable in Africa. I'll be bringing Professor Auguste Yankey to give an take the facts of welcome of his very nice of me now. With that, Professor Auguste Yankey. He's actually the chairman board of directors of Ratifications, one of the founding sponsors of this conference in the first great session. And I'm inviting Professor Sani right now for your comments. Professor Sani, over to you.
Someone needs to work on this all day.
Good morning. Benga, can you hear me now? Okay. Good morning.
Yes, I can hear you, sir. Loud and clear. Good morning, sir. It's actually 9:05 experience, so it's morning here. So the rest of Africa, good day. You can go ahead, sir.
Good morning.
Welcome, my guest.
All protocol duly observed. I'm Professor Abiola Sani, a professor of law in University of Lagos. I wear the cap of the chairman of the board of directors of TACTEC, and it's my singular honor to warmly welcome you to this pioneering event. TACTEC, in response to its corporate social responsibility, is putting this together in order to deepen conversation around data protection in Africa. And we are happy that we are not in this alone. We have the support of men and women of goodwill and institutions. So we are leveraging the support of the Honorable Minister of Communication and Digital Economy in the person of Dr. Issa Ali Pantami. We are also happy to have the institutional support of NIDA. So I warmly welcome the DG, Kashifu Unua Abdullahi. We also have on board the Chief Executive, Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, Mr. Babatunde Irukera. And we have Banwe and Igodalo strategically supporting us in this initiative. We will duly acknowledge the support of everyone when we come to the vote of thanks session. But most importantly, I welcome everyone who has taken time to be part of this conversation. The buzzword today, or the buzz phrase today, is that personal data is the oil of digital economy. Our reliable statistics show that Africa has one of the fastest growing internet penetration in the world. You agree with me that data management is critical to the present and the future of Africa. If we are to arrest neo-colonization, we have to do something decisive, something continuous in terms of policy, in terms of legal, and in terms of administrative actions. And it's gratifying to note that this is an area where African youths are poised to lead and take decisive action. Data security and protection requires national and regional initiatives. And AU has not adopted a Sudan look. So there is an AU Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Protection, which is popularly called the Malabo Convention, which is going to be the central focus of this conference. I'm happy that we have experts who are going to speak to main themes and sub-themes on this issue. So the question is, since the Malabo Convention, have we gained the right traction? The experts in the house, they know all the issues, and I believe that this conference is going to spin the way forward. So in terms of engagement, I robust discussions of not only the problem, but where do we go from now? So ladies and gentlemen, without more ado, I wish we could lock ourselves up in this fiscal environment until we come up with a solution to all the issues. But the good thing is that this is the beginning of a decisive conversation on something that is very key and important to the future of Nigeria and also the future of Africa. So I look forward to a robust debate, discussion, and consensus building as we move data protection forward in Africa. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, it's my singular honor to welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. Have a wonderful deliberations. God bless.
Thank you very much, Professor Abiola, for that wonderful welcome remarks. I will look forward to an interesting session ahead. Next on the agenda will actually be the keynote address by the Honorable Minister of Communication and Digital Economy, Dr. Isa Ali Pantani. I will try to come to discuss whether you can actually get communication from him right now. But if we have him in, then we'll just go right to take the Minister's keynote address. Okay, we'll take a few minutes break while we try to connect with the minister or his representative so we can take that keynote address. So the interim, we give the brochure about something shared to every one of us. You just take your time to just go through what you should be expecting for the rest of today. For today's event, the conference sharing, we're going to be having two panel sessions. So the first one is going to be the AU Convention, Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection, understanding the convention, its challenges and prospects. And the other session will be a comparative review of the regulation and administration of personal data protection and cybersecurity laws and jurisdictions in Africa, where we're looking at how we can learn from the best and encourage the outcome. So, we already have some of our panelists in house already for the first panel session. I will still again waiting for the minister's keynote address. While we look at that, this look through what you're expecting for the rest of this session ahead. So I'm communicating my students to confirm if we have any feedback concerning the keynote address, or if we just move right into take the address from the Director General of NISTA, who's going to represent them here on the future of data protection and cybersecurity in Africa. Calls from NISTA. I'm sure that will come back with Dr. Vincent Olasuji is available to take. He's representing the Director General of NISTA to take the talks from NISTA, the future of data protection and cybersecurity in Africa. Dr. Olasuji, can you have that? Good morning, Mr. Olufemi Daniel. Mr. Olufemi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, sir.
Yes, just some few minutes back, uh, decided that because of the importance of this event, he would be personally present to quickly deliver his speech, though he has a flight to catch. So if we give the DG in 5 minutes, he should be available to take his speech.
Thank you, Mr. President. Okay. My mind is okay. I don't know. Yeah, Christian music. What's on the let's keep something. Okay. Is there any way to explain? Is it muted? Is it muted? Yeah. You might not be turned off. Or the muted. it shortly. And I'll read this citation very quickly. Kashifu Inuwa Abdullahi is Director General and CEO of the National Information Technology Development Agency. He's a graduate of computer science from the Abuja University of Bauchi and Massachusetts Institute of Technology, school trade strategist, over 15 years experience, IT operations, business transformation and solution architecture across both private and public sectors. He attended leadership and management courses at Harvard University in the USA, University of Cambridge in the UK, and IMD Business School in Switzerland. Next after me, I'm the Director General of the Mr. Kashifu Inuwa Abdullahi. Over to you, sir.
You can't hear me.
We can't hear you. We can't hear you, sir. Hello, Director General, sir. Okay, we're not going to speak it, sir, but we can't actually hear you now. Okay, I think the DG is back now.
Is your mic on?
Good morning, sirs. Good morning, Binga.
Yes, Mr. Bell, can you hear me?
Yes, the DG actually, holds our distinguished guests in high esteem. That was why he decided to attend personally. So, he changed his program just a few minutes back. And so just, I'm sure he would, he has entered now. I'm sure in the next few minutes, we'll be able to.
We actually saw it for we're not hearing. I think he connected, but we're having challenges with his audio. We're not actually hearing from here.
But the audio, okay.
Okay, good morning, DG. Can you hear me, sir? We can actually see Director General is now video, but we can't hear him audio.
Go on, sir. Let him go on. Let him just hold the line and don't cut the line. Okay. No, I can't hear him at all. He's not talking. No. He's just. Gosh. We can't say. It's like, hello, Rena. We can't hear the DJ. We can't hear it. It said it's not from their end. Hello?
It's just want to check if TG is muted.
No, it's not muted. It's not muted. I'm really. Yes. Yes.
I don't know your authority. I don't know what you can. There's a lot of background. I don't know whatever. They're hearing what is going on around here. So your technical issues and your sound issues, you're willing to fix it. What kind of spy wants that?
Oh yeah, can you talk to the mic? Please continue. Which you can go soon. It's only that shade screen. That shade screen.
Just all the panelists are ready for the first panel session. I can see some sense of the panel here on. We have Mr. Bidemi in the studio here with us. The panel is to keep up attending. Representing Olumide, Dr. Kemi Omotubora, can you confirm if you are available? And ready if you're here. Okay, I think we have some Tunde Balogun back. Also, with us on panel one as well. Mr. Balogun, any updates? Can we have the address of DG?
The DG, I think we will just record it and send, because apparently, this is a new. I can hear you. I can hear you well.
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yeah. So I said apparently this is a new platform, and I think we're having a lot of initial teaching challenges. So people will record this thing, send it to the Conclave, or send it direct, and we appreciate the invitation.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much, Mr. Daniel. So after proceed forward, then just move on. So the first panel section is on the AIM Convention, Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection, understanding the convention, its challenges and prospects. On that panel section, we have the following people. We have Mr. Olumide, represented already at the convention, so he's with us. We have Mr. Olufemi Daniel, who is the data just spoke with me now. He's also on that panel. We have Dr. Kemi Omotubora, also on that panel. We have Mr. Tunde Balogun, also on that panel. We have Mr. Auguste Yankey. Before you go on board, I will just give a very quick brief on each one of the participants before we come on to join the panel. Panel session that we mentioned is going to kick off at 10 a.m. So, first on the panel there is Mr. Auguste Yankey, who is actually the ICT Policy and Project Manager for the African Union, operating from the Addis Ababa Ethiopia office. But the other disclosure presenter here. We have Mr. Bidemi, who is the CEO and the MC of Tax Aid and Tax Aid Technology Limited, Tax Aid Group. And that's a part of the Dr. Olufemi Daniel, who is a senior lecturer in law at the University of Lagos, chief editor of this panel. That's a part of the Olufemi Daniel is a legal regulations monitoring and compliance of National Information Technology Development Agency as leader in Nigeria. And just this panel is Mr. Rocky Atkinson, who is also the dean of the NDP Academic. The Academic Center is one of the sponsors of this event as well. So we should be moderating this session also with Dr. Kemi Omotubora. So we're moving right away into the panel session. Once we confirm all the panelists are on board and good to go. So we'll take a 10 minutes into our just while we try to get all the panelists on board right now. We'll take some messages from some of our sponsors. Meanwhile, while we wait for the panelists to get set to start the first panel session. Thank you. Of the Association of Section compliance organization in Nigeria is also the same panel and also Mr. Tunde Balogun. Incidentally, I should also mention his name is Mr. Tunde Balogun. So happy birthday, Mr. Balogun. I'm sure you still tell us more when you come on the panel session. But it's you, sir. We should make more years.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Gengashile. Thank you very much.
Welcome, sir. Good to see you. So your final session will start in a bit once we have everyone. I can see Mr. Fitz already also ready to go. The panel. Okay. Good morning, Mr. Fitz. Mr. Fitz is actually the dean of the Abuja Declaration and also the managing director of the Data Strategy Group. It's good to have you actually in this session along with Dr. Kemi Omotubora. Like we mentioned earlier, just to get technical process while we get everyone else on the line. We have to start being really good in-house because so and Dr. Kemi Omotubora also be joining us today. So the technical guide is already live on the platform. So in 10 minutes we're coming back to proceed with this final session. Thank you. Well, yes.
cancellation.
Yes.
And then everybody's
They know it from outside.
So I'm sure the football Auguste Yankey, who is our representative for this kind of session. Auguste has been the key government and cybersecurity reporting for India and Abuja Declaration since 2017. From 2017 to 2019, he was a member of the board of directors, and his work helps promote direct and cost-free dialogue between government and citizens. Between 2014 and 2015, he was a very consultant for Bidemi. Before he was a consultant with Medina International Foundation, he holds a master in law and management of high security at the University of Belgium. I'll be briefly around the profile of Dr. Kemi Omotubora before the discussion. Dr. Kemi Omotubora is a lecturer at the Health of Department of Commercial and Industrial Law, University of Lagos. She holds a PhD on cybersecurity law from the University of Leeds, UK, and Master of Law in Cyber Law from the same university. She has previously studied at one of the University of India, where she obtained first and master's degree in law. Her core research provides focus on the intersection of law and technology, particularly privacy, data protection, identity management, and regulation of emerging technologies and data. Adekemi is passionate about data protection, digital inclusion, and the gender aspect of digital technologies, and organizing them around screens. More reason for this panel session. Hello, Mr. Daniel. Welcome back.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Difficulties with our other panelists transferring this kind of experience.
Everyone's got their notes and they can hear us. Let's move along very quickly.
I can hear you.
Fantastic.
I think we're still waiting for others to join, or?
Yeah, but I can say it's yours, so let's move on very quickly. Hi, Tunde. Can you hear me?
Can you confirm that you can hear us, please?
Hello, Tunde. Can you hear me? Good, fantastic.
Okay. Ms. Appleton, can you hear us, please? Can you confirm some proceed in the session?
Were you addressing me?
Yes, please.
Yes. I can hear you. I hear everybody. At the moment, I can see yourself, Bidemi, Mr. Daniel, and Mr. Balogun.
Okay, perfect. So, Ms. Vina. We proceed now.
Okay.
We just wanted for Ms. Omotubora, so she's supposed to be joining us as well.
Is my co-moderator? Yes, there she is.
Can you hear us, please?
I can hear you.
It's just me. Okay. Can anybody hear me? I don't know if you're waiting for me.
Perfect. Yes, ma'am. You're obviously.
Can you hear me, please?
Perfectly.
Can Dr. Kemi, I can hear you.
You can hear me, okay. Okay, we're good to go then.
Hello? Yeah, I guess we're waiting for room XQ.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. Bidemi, thank you. Welcome everybody to session 1 of the Africa Data Protection Conclave. I'd like to introduce all of our panelists. Today, we've got Mr. Bidemi Olumide. We've also got Mr. Olufemi Daniel. We've got Dr. Kemi Omotubora. And we also have Mr. Tunde Balogun. The topic for this session, African Union Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection. Understanding the convention, its challenges, and prospects. We're incredibly honored to have with us today Mr. Auguste Yankey, who is the Director for ICT Policy and Project Manager for the African Convention. He'll be presenting the paper this morning. Now, my co-moderator, I know that I'm billed as the moderator for this session, and unfortunately, as these things happen, I've had a little bit of a clash today, but it was really important for me to be present here today because this is something that is incredibly close to my heart, something I'm very passionate about, and it was an honor to be invited to. So my co-moderator, who also happens to be a faculty member for the NDPR Academy, is Dr. Kemi Omotubora. So if attendants see me slip off a little bit later in the session, this is the reason why. But I think that hopefully I can hand over now to Mr. Auguste Yankey, who'll be presenting the paper. May I ask just to ensure that there is no interference, that everybody mutes during the presentation? And then we can unmute again, just facilitate discussions afterwards.
Shortly, just trying to join us. Did you get that, please?
I guess maybe while we wait for August, we could start the conversation. We have a mandate as a panel to deal with the topic that Ronke's just read out. The mandate for us is to discuss it extensively. It's pretty much focused on the convention itself, and then come up with the necessary action points. So while we wait for August, I guess we can begin the conversations right here. I happen to have been privileged to see August's presentation for now, and the bit of it that gets on me, which really is the crux of this topic, really, and the challenges and the prospects of the convention itself. So while we give us the honor to being the progenitor of the convention itself, to speak so much to the historics and the events that led to the convention and the current stage of this convention, I would just want to pick up from what I consider to be the issues that August raised in terms of the challenges of the convention itself. Again, I happen to have seen an expo on what he needs to talk about. And I think summarily, much of what the others touched on were some of the challenges he sees with the personal data protection regime, as well as the cyber security regime in Africa, and basically highlighted them in four different prisons. He spoke of some geopolitical challenges, some social challenges, some technology challenges, and security. On the social end of it, he explained that Africa will need to ensure the protection of the fundamental rights and the freedom of citizens. That's the right to private and family life, professional, confidentiality of communications, freedom of expression, movement of association, etc. In the fight against cybercrime. That's what is summarized as a challenge before us. On the geopolitical end, it says that we must limit the loss of digital sovereignty in the event of a massive transfer of data abroad. The need for Africa to be secured in terms of its digital
or data sovereignty. On the security end, it says that we must prevent attacks against each member state's information system and to avoid access or disclosure of information about national defense. He gave an example of the WikiLeaks scenario and or Snowden effects. And on technology, which is for the fourth of the four quadrants, it says that we must understand technologies before we adopt them or before we use them to detect and suppress violations. And I think he was trying to segue into the issues around electronic evidence or in terms of punishing breaches in the cyber security space, essentially cyber crime. Then he spoke about the need to understand the technologies to combat mass dropping in censorship, surveillance of communication by cyber criminals globally. And that's those are the four challenges it says face us. And he mentioned, I mean, he highlighted about 6 recommendations. I'm very sure when it comes in, when he's able to join eventually, he'll be able to expatiate more on them. Each recommendations are 6-pointed. One is we need to support the development of national cybersecurity legislation. We need to promote the training of stakeholders, magistrates, law enforcement officers, prosecutors, investigation officers, or the due application on the provisions of the legislation. It says we must develop an awareness program of cybercrime and personal data protection for the general public, companies, and administrations. We must develop a private partnership on resilient cybersecurity infrastructure. It calls that the national cloud. And then we must promote the use of local services and other free services offered by internet giants. And says we must, the last is that we must strengthen cooperation between national authorities in charge of personal data protection. That summarizes these people that happen to have seen all the challenges and the recommendations on this particular topic. And if I may, I'm subject to what Ronke thinks or what Dr. Omotubora thinks. I just want to go straight into my intervention of some of the challenges and the prospects I see with the convention itself. Can you hear me okay? Am I allowed to proceed?
I should mute myself. Yes, I can hear you.
Good. I have some permission to proceed. Am I allowed to proceed?
Most definitely. Please do.
Great. The convention itself, fantastic. For those who are not exposed to it, or for those who don't know much about it, I mean, this was a convention that was adopted at the EU Assembly, and that was in June 2014. It's a 38 articles convention, basically touches on three major key points. The fourth is just provisional as it relates to its adoption and its implementation. The three key things it touches on are electronic transactions, meaning electronic commerce and electronic contracts or e-contracts, touches on personal data protection and cyber security and cybercrime. For what it is, it's to, as much as possible, get African member states to set the legislative framework within their different jurisdictions to deal with these three main issues. A lot of restrictions were made in the convention, and a lot of principles as well. Much of our interest relates on the principles. The principles are universal, they are objective. Some of the challenges we might have might be with the restrictions. As much as possible, we would want a situation where international conventions of the nature of the Malabo Convention, as much as possible, dwells on principles. Then leave much of the prescription on how the rules be applied to much of the member states. And so, as today, here we have about 8 state parties to the convention, and a lot of the member states who are still not state parties have actually proceeded to actually have some of these regimes in place. So, for example, Nigeria, where we operate, we have clear legislations in the area of electronic transactions, and that's both e-commerce and e-contracts. We have a legislation that deals with personal data protection, as well as that on cyber security or cyber crimes in particular. Our dimensions to approaching this are a bit different. It naturally should be so, just like we also expect from our fellow African countries as well. So it's just important that we should, to an extent, have some autonomy in terms of setting the prescriptive rules, while the principles in themselves are largely adopted or as enunciated in the convention. And so for me, if there is a challenge, it will really be a challenge around some of the prescriptions, the need for us to stick very clearly with the principles, and then allow the member states or who eventually become the state parties to the convention decide on how they choose to implement it within their jurisdiction. I mean, speaking of restrictions, the two that readily jump for me will be issues around the National Personal Data Protection Authority. We think, and given what we've experienced in Nigeria in terms of the success we have so far seen in our personal data protection regime, that it is just very important that both the private and the public sector work together in this space. So when we have a prescription that says that businesses that probably consume data, or businesses that are in this space that consume some daily data, should not be members of the National Data Protection Authority. That comes with some hesitation. Because what our nascent or what our reality is that there has certainly to be collaboration. There has to be some level of cooperation between the government and the private sector, which essentially is sort of what we're currently experiencing this morning. This is an initiative that came from the private sector in the need to engender conversations on this particular issue. But then the private sector wouldn't have done anything in the public sector. In our case, by regulator NICTA had not set the ball from the onset. Times again, we do not hesitate to always give kudos and thanks to the
initiative started by the current Minister of Communications and Digital Economy in Nigeria in January 2019, when data protection regulation was set rolling. And what we experienced is that the model adopted, which essentially involved, I call it the PPP model, I call it essentially in collaboration between the private sector and the public sector, as it was largely responsible for some of the success that we've seen so far. So it really goes to say that that level of collaboration should really be extended. Currently, we have a bill on data protection, the data protection bill, which is going to set in place our data protection commission. And what we basically done is to realize that that data protection commission will certainly need a lot of the input of the private sector in it. I mean, I'm very happy to listen to August when it comes on board as to probably have a healthy debate on the issue on whether we really do need the private sector participating in the regulation, I mean, of the data protection space. So I mean that's one major challenge that I see. So maybe at this point in time, I guess I need the floor to other artists, to other panelists, to speak on the issues. Unless you're muted, we can hear you, we can see your mouth move, but can't hear you speak.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Good.
Yes, I'm still with you for another sort of 5 minutes or so before I need to hand over to my co-moderator, Dr. Kemi. Thank you for, that, introduction. I know that Auguste Yankey has indicated that he's actually ready to present his paper. What would be interesting is if he's not 100% ready to go online, are you happy for us to, for me to throw some questions out to the panelists whilst we wait? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Good.
Okay, I will voice a bit of feedback. So in looking at this sort of issue of cybersecurity, in Africa very specifically, but I'm also going to sort of highlight globally, this is an area that I've been deeply interested in. And prior to COVID, the volume of cybercrime was projected to reach $6 trillion by 2021, and 2021 is just around the corner. That figure in Nigeria was projected by analysts to be about $1 billion by 2021. What we've seen since the beginning of this year has been a fourfold increase in the level of cybercrime that has been perpetrated globally. I'm just sort of, interested to invite a little bit of discussion amongst the panel, is that, looking at the Malabo Convention, we've got 14 states that have signed, 8 ratified, and 8 have deposited. What do you see as the sort of key challenges to getting sort of adoption from, more countries? Because this is actually a very serious matter that is leading to the destruction of, wealth. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what the barriers, what you see as the key challenges. Mr. Daniel?
No, I'm
yes, I'd love to hear from you.
I'm done. Thank you. Okay.
All right.
We have Auguste Yankey.
August,
Perhaps
yes,
we deal with this before we hand over to him.
Okay,
Yeah. Finally.
Welcome, Mr. Yankey. It's a pleasure to have you on board.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. I think that it was only me you were waiting for. So I don't know how to share my presentation, or if someone at the session can share the one I sent to you. We will.
So we're just going to try and get your presentation onto the main screen.
Okay.
So just in the interest of time, are you comfortable to begin? Even though it would be very useful for participants to see the slides, then we can take them to the relevant slide as you progress. Bidemi, does that work? Are we able to project the presentation on his behalf? Auguste.
Hello. Yes.
Yes. My recommendation is that we let's flow with this. We're gonna hand the floor over to you.
If you can stream, okay, no problem.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Excuse me for this technical problem, and I'm very happy to be with you and to present this slide on the African Union Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection. Okay, first of all, my presentation will be divided into 3-4 parts. The first one will, lay down the context and the challenges to develop and to establish this convention. The second part will be on the legal framework and the history. Hello? Hello? Is that okay? Oh, thank you. Now it's okay.
You can see the presentation now.
Yes, yes.
Wonderful.
Yes, okay. So, okay, part one, the context. Please, if you can put on the context slides. Okay, the context is, we are, how you can know, I mean, you may know that today, we are in the world characterized by globalization of risk and also technical dependence. Now we know that we are in the village. We call it the village, the global village. So where everything is interdependent. The context two. Hello? Hello? Is it okay? Okay, the context. Can you hear me? I can continue. Okay. The context two, as you can see in the slides, is that all the world now as one. So Africa must play its role in securing electronic transaction because the other continents they are doing the same thing. The context three. Okay, the context three, Africa should, as a matter of urgency, offer individuals, but not only individuals, but for organization, for also state, African Union, we may say like that, can offer measures and procedures for more effective management of technological, informational, and legal risk, because our world now is risky. Okay. Let's go to the challenges. The challenges. When we were working on this convention, we see that he was not the fact only to get into one global treaties, but is to get in one who is in line with your cultural heritage, but also for the sake of survival and sovereignty of states. So that's why to address cybersecurity, we have to get into political will and to define how to implement a strategy for development of digital infrastructure and services, and also how to articulate an effective multidisciplinary cybersecurity strategies. Challenge, second part. Since you have the presentation, I think we will share with all the participants later. Okay, for our challenges in the Pan-African institution, we wanted to create a climate of confidence and trust that is predictable, organized, protective, secured, and also integrated, but above all, comprehensive. That means where we can have all the 55 countries from which we get some, how do you call it, some provision. We get into the reality, the cultural behavior, the procedure, the national different procedure, so that we will get a comprehensive document. Okay, if we pass to quickly, because I know that we spend too much time due to technical problem. If we go to the legal framework, the legal framework was simply because in 2009, we had a meeting we used to call the African Conference of Ministers in Charge of ICT, where we adopt the resolution to get into a development of African on African. Is that okay? I can continue. The first declaration was the Oliver Tambo Declaration for the adoption of the convention. That we went to the 14th AU Summit of Head of State in 2010 to endorse this resolution. After that, we got our ministry conference. The third step was the Abuja Declaration from the Conference of Ministers in Charge of ICT. This was in 2010, and after that, we went to the Khartoum Declaration. Is again another endorsement for the final draft. The final draft was already done in 2012, and we got the endorsement of this final draft. And then we went to the Conference of Ministers in charge of Justice to get the legal validations. And finally, we got the adoption of the convention during the 23rd AU Summit of Head of States in Malabo. This was in June 2014, 27 June 2014. Okay, the adoption process, as I said, we got first a draft convention. We took almost 2 years to get this draft convention, but not only this, we went
Yeah. I've sent it now. Sent it. Okay. By your SMS, text message. No, let me resend. Let me resend.
Okay, so once we got the draft convention, we traveled around the continent to visit the 5 regions, and we did what we call a regional workshop on cyber legislation in order to get the approval, let's say like that, the approval of the countries, this region. Hello?
Oh, okay.
Is it okay?
Yeah.
I can continue? Okay, so we went to Gabon, Libreville for the central, region. We went to Abidjan for ECOWAS. We also organized a tripartite meeting for the rest of the region of the continent. And then we got the final I can say like that, the final draft of this convention. Okay, let's go quickly for the next page where you can see exactly the pictures of this adoption process. You see the first validation by the REX and the national experts. After that, the translation into our 4 languages, which you may know is French, English, is also Portuguese and Arabic. After that, we went for the technical Okay, as you can see in yellow, we got the adoptions. Okay, when we go to the next part, the part 3 now, the part 3 of my presentation is the convention itself. Okay, what was the objectives? The objective was simply, was to propose to adopt at the level of the continent a convention which establish a credible framework for cybersecurity in Africa. thing. Okay, so as I said, the okay, so the first part I can say, to compile in this convention, as I said, it was the e-transaction, also the protection of personal data, promotion of cyber security, and fight against cyber crime. But the ultimate goals are to protect the right of person and also to protect the institutions and organizations against threat and attack coming from the cyberspace. The next slides, you can see the mechanism used by the drafting team to develop this convention. First was to spell out the option for an African Union-wide cybersecurity policy, but also to establish an African Union-wide cyber ethics, to organize our transaction, I mean electronic transaction, electronic signature, electronic publicity, but also to organize the protection of personal data, because we know that the most important things here in the cyberspace is to protect the data. Okay, and finally, to lay the foundation for I can say cyber crime law, cyber procedure law, and treatment of cyber crimes. Okay, what is the expected result is first to get a definition of key cyber terminologies in legislation, because I know when we were traveling around Africa, I can say the word minor in Africa does not have the same meaning in Arabic countries and in, I can say, Christian countries, let's say like that. So it was very important to define a key cyber terminology in our legislation. Second things, it was, and of course, to harmonize cyber legislations and to get provision for the African Union. So now we can pass and go to the slides regarding the ratifications. The ratification is the last part, last point of the part 3 of my presentation. The ratification, we were targeting, or we are still targeting 15 countries. That is the quorum. We need to have 15 countries ratify the AU Convention, the Malabo Convention. As of October 2020, we can see here the ratification is 8 countries for ratification, while we have 14 countries who signed this convention. So we have these 8 countries. You can see in the next slide, they are namely Angola, Ghana, Guinea, Mozambique, Mauritius, Namibia, Rwanda, and Senegal. That is the 8 countries, the 8 AU member states who ratified the convention today. Okay, now let's go to the last part of my presentation, is the architecture of the convention itself and its content. As you can see, in this convention, we have 4 parts. The first one concerns the electronic commerce. The second part is regarding the personal data. The third part is combating cybercrime, fight against cybercrime, and the last is the final provision. Okay, so you can also have the link for who want to download the convention itself. Okay, since we are in the conclave regarding data protections, I highlighted in the next slides the sessions, I mean the chapter 2, talking about personal data. You can see here that we have almost, as I can see, almost 5 sections. 5 sections. The first is on the personal data protection itself. The second is with regard to the institutional framework. The third section is related to the obligation while you are processing the data, the personal data. The fourth section is the rights of the person himself, the right of the data subject. And the last section of the chapter regarding the protection of personal data is in line with the obligation of the personal data controller. Okay. In the last, the next slide, you can see that the challenge of personal data protection facing the cybercrime is, I can say, from multiple angles. We have the technology itself that is obvious, but we also have social challenges, security challenges, and geopolitics challenges. Okay, the next slide, the social challenges. We need to ensure the protection of the fundamental rights and freedoms of citizens. You see, in the fights against cybercrime, the geopolitics, we have a limit, the loss of digital sovereignty in the event of a massive transfer of data abroad. You know that in Europe, we have the RGPD, who I can say, who talk as a framework for those who want to transfer data from and to European Union. We also have the security aspects. We all know this, and the technology. Let's go quickly to the recommendation before the technology come again to stop this presentation. Hello. The recommendation is as follows. First, we need to support the development of national cybersecurity legislation. Here, I don't have enough time, but we have a kind of a map of African countries, African member states, which already have an agency for personal data protections. The second, we need to promote the training of stakeholders, all the stakeholders from justice, from also okay. Okay, and last, we always talk about this is to strengthen the cooperation between national authorities in charge of personal data protection. We need to strengthen these cooperations. I think this is the last slide of my presentation. Thank you very much, and I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Do we still have Dr. Omotubora on the line? Thanks again, August. We got through loud and clear here. Despite the several technological interruptions. Thanks again for the insightful presentation. Do we have Dr. Omotubora or Roque still on the panel? Dr. Omotubora, okay. You need to unmute your phone and you need to unmute your device.
Hi, it's Kemi. You can kind of unmute. He is speaking, but we can't hear you. Can you confirm that? That's Hi, it's Kemi.
I guess while we wait for Dr. Omotubora, if I may, Arena, why don't you just proceed into the panelists intervention? Today's been on the call way before every one of us. So if they can just come with the intervention while once Dr. Omotubora is good, she takes the reign of the panel. As it were. Today, we can see your face. Let's hear you. Actually, you need to unmute your device as well. We'll just try framing, I don't know where the issues with connection is. We need your devices unmuted. If you can hear me, then we're good. But we can hear you.
Okay. So I don't know. Can I? Do I go on? Do I go on?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes.
All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, thank you so much, Auguste. Bonjour, Monsieur Auguste. Thank you so much. It was a very insightful presentation. I thought I knew about the Malabo Convention, but your presentation really gave me far more in-depth analysis of what it is about. And I think it's good that we are the conclave to actually push the agenda of the Malabo Convention and the harmonization of data protection in Africa. I hope I'm still clear, because while I'm monitoring, my honorable minister is still trying to get connected to be physically, to be virtually on this platform. So while I would like, they are trying to call me now just for me to confirm if the honorable minister is ready. Immediately is ready, I'll let the organizers know.
We have the parents election at this time. Mr. Balogun, the last minister. Okay, the sound. Essentially, studio show, yeah. Okay, should I have you back?
Dr. Kemi, can I please just go on, because the Honorable Minister is not being able to get access to the platform, and so that we will not keep people waiting unnecessarily. I don't know if we can continue with the discussion.
All right, that's fine, Femi. August, please, can you mute your device? We're getting a lot of feedback from you, August, please. But Femi, you can please proceed so we can, we're after you. We'll get other panelists who are there, and then allow the audience to throw in the questions at the same time, so we can wrap up this session as quickly as possible. So over to you, Femi.
Thank you very much, Olumide. And like I mentioned, it was good that we had that background from August. Now, the question that comes to mind is, why would it be that we need just 15 countries to ratify the convention, and only 8 have ratified it since 2014? From what August, across various countries, but I think this is where we really need to begin to look at it. And from my reading, my understanding is that any law that we need to make in Africa, we need to go beyond just prescribing what is supposed to be done, what are the principles. We need to begin to look at, we need to move from prescription to empowerment. How does the Malabo Convention help me as a private individual to be actualize my goal? Our businesses to be able to move from one point of empowerment to another. How does it help further the academic discourse? How does it empower courts to be able to interpret certain kinds of laws better? The fact that we've not had this kind of thinking, I mean, because I've gone through the Malabo Convention, it covers all the principles you could think of, just a few, except for things like right to be forgotten is not there. Then on the basis of data processing, it says there must be consent, but it now listed 4 exceptions that if there is no consent, it listed public interest, vital interest. It listed the other ones that we know, aside from legitimate interest of the data controller. That was what was not listed. So ordinarily, the Malabo Convention regards consent as the the topmost basis for processing. And if you also look at it, it follows the Convention 108. All the principles in Convention 108 are included. Most of the things in the GDPR are there, even though the Malabo Convention had come on board since 2014. That tells you that if it is for drafting, the work has been done. But the question, like I mentioned when I started my presentation, is the question is, how does this help the ordinary African, not just government? And so that's where I would want to make. a couple of things that I think the African Union needs to quickly do. Number one, we need to look at it in the light of the recent events happening now. Data most African countries want to plug into. What do we need to do to now begin to tie the Malabo Convention into digital economy aspiration? That's number one. Number two is that the awareness, even though for us, even in Nigeria as a country, we are also struggling with awareness, but I can tell you that in the last 20 months, we have done far, far, far more. I'm not saying this as, we have empirical evidence to show what we have done. So I think that Malabo Convention is too strategic to just people going to regions. In West Africa, they went to Ivory Coast. How many Nigerians, how many people were on board? And most of the people we usually invite to those conventions or programs are government people. And some of the government people are not people who really are facing the private sector. And I tell you, cybersecurity cannot work without the private sector. Data protection cannot work without the private sector. Knowledge economy cannot work without the private sector. So policy is a farce. If we think all we need to do is to write the law, get the ratification, and then everything will be fine, it won't be fine that way. We need to use Malabo Convention to begin to look at, number one, how do we begin to have certification for Africans in cybersecurity, data protection, and knowledge economy? So I, as an African, I can get the certification and provide my service anywhere in Africa. Number two, how do I provide data protection as a service, which is what we are doing in Nigeria, have licensed people that can provide data protection across African countries, whether in Benin Republic, Cote d'Ivoire, Gabon, everywhere. How do we ensure that academics like Dr. Kemi, who is on the call, can really take a hold? The reason why NDPR, we have the measure of success we've had, is also because we've had academics questioning us. And we need to dig deep to understand what we are saying for us to be able to respond to them. The Malabo Convention has not been properly queried, it has not been properly researched, it has not been communicated. And I think because I also know there are very distinguished people on the panel, these are the reasons why I think the convention has not gained the kind of traction that we wanted to get. So in conclusion, number one, we need to look at the convention again. Does it meet with the current realities? Number two, what is the opportunity that the convention is bringing on board to the ordinary African? Number three, how do we ensure that and then there should be more openness on the part of African Union communication. Let people know what you are doing and how we can come on board. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak at this very distinguished event. These are my thoughts. Thank you.
We have a panelist who's rights subject.
Hi, Kemi, can you still hear me?
Thank you.
I was expecting that you would raise some issues over an issue I earlier dropped on the table, but now that August is here, maybe towards wrapping up this session, we could really debate that a bit. That's my query around. I think the provision should be Article 11.6 of the convention, if I'm not mistaken, and it's about the constitution of the National Personal Data Protection Authority. And I think that issue also segues into the National Cybersecurity Authority as well. And the provisions, I think the provision goes to the effect to say that the businesses and the private sector participants or businesses, taxed, for example, and so many other businesses that, by nature of what they do, consume personal data, might not need to participate in the National Data Protection Authority. I think National Personal Data Protection Authority, much as the thinking might be to ensure some autonomy for such an authority, but I'm thinking, and that's what I said initially, that given what NITA has done in ensuring that the private sector actually plays in this space, and
who is talking?
You rightly captured it with the words data protection as a service. Don't you think we'll be shooting ourselves in the foot
Who is talking now?
to say or to adopt such a prescription by the Malawi Convention that emphasizes the private sector in the regulation of the data protection space? And I say this as a lawyer and as a business person, that one of the fundamental things in business is the need for rules to be certainty around the rules. Everyone wants to know what is allowed and what is not allowed. So you also want to make sure that if you have competition, you're not playing by a different set of rules from your competition. So it just makes it important that as businesses, you want to understand what government is doing. You want to support government. You want government to uphold these rules. You want to see all of that in play. And that guarantees you some sort of certainty as to how you carry out your operations. But in a situation where you might
so
process, and that's the August agrees, and that is this interpretation of that provision, I don't see how that is happening. I really feel strongly that independence is a greater value than independence. We must find ways to work together. I don't know whether you have a reaction to that.
Is that to me or to Augusta? But I can quickly just sorry, because I know that yes, I know there are the chairman, the convener of the Association of Data Protection, organizations are here, so I really respect his office and Dr. Kemi and Mr. Augusta. So I don't want to take too much time. I actually see the point you are making in Article 11, but the plain reading of that Article 11 is just saying that a private sector person, not a data controller who is from the private sector, should not be part of the constituents of the data protection authority of the nation. And as much as we may not get the law changed today, I don't see that as a problem. All they are just saying is that if the data protection authority has a board that, a commission and all that, that you should not a Google in Nigeria or Facebook or MTN should not be part of the board. And if you understand the challenges that some African countries are facing, because I interface with some of them, the challenges they are having is a big tech is so powerful in some of their countries, and that provision was actually probably advocated by some of the countries to be able to reduce controlling. So that the private sector cannot play in the data protection and cybersecurity. It's just that they cannot be part of the board of the Data Protection Authority to safeguard its independence. Thank you.
Does August actually have another reaction? Is it possible? I mean, it's a technical issue. We say either Dr. Omotubora or Mr. Tunde Balogun. Well, maybe while we're sorting them out, I think it's just, I guess maybe it's a debate between you and I mean, this afternoon, except maybe we have other members of the audience who, or the participants rather, will be happy to join in the conversation. I think it's you could argue it both ways because if you do have a commission, you certainly want you certainly do want. I mean, and I think it's exemplified in what we currently have in the draft of our data protection bill, which clearly does not adopt this principle of the Madrid Convention in terms of its constitution. So I think that a situation where you do have clearly in the Constitution will certainly ensure that the regulators and those who are considered independent in the vast majority compared to those who have business interests in the state. I think it just adds so much to the conversation when all the different stakeholders are part of the regulator, and then all relevant arguments are heard, and clearly the right regime is instituted. It is necessary for consensus building. I mean, that's my personal opinion. And then we're going to achieve so much more. I mean, we see here today to discuss so much about the rights of data subjects, national interest, and national interest in the areas of cybersecurity. And let's not forget that the first and foremost conversation to be had, it is actually the infrastructure building. Clearly, we've seen a lot of the technical challenges we have watched today. Around issues of broadband penetration and all of that, which is largely responsible for this. So clearly a lot of investments still have to be made in the space. Then the same so-called big tech and the others are those who are going to put in a lot of these investments. So it's just important that we have very good representation when it comes to setting the rules again. There is no business person who will not be firmly interested in ensuring that rules are put in place, because with that they are able to we're able to determine how we do our businesses and how we play, and ensuring that everyone conforms to those rules. Thanks again, Kevin. I don't know whether there's any other issue on the table. And so we could go into the adoption of some of the action points that I think Femi has Dr. August Femi has eloquently put forward. Dr. Omotubora, are you good to speak now?
Can you hear me now?
Fantastic, I can hear you now. Fantastic, good. This is why, Doctor.
This has been describing. It's slightly frustrating. The glitches. I don't know. Maybe it's me because I've not used hopping, this app hopping. So maybe it's me, maybe I don't know how to, but I think, there have been quite a number of glitches. So am I still audible?
Yes, you are, madam.
Oh, okay, so I apologize. I've just been kicked to the sides. Imagine. So I don't know. Do you just want me to make some comments, or you know, because we've a session, a panel. Are we out of time? Do you want me to make some comments? What do you? Where are we? Oh dear.
Panel interventions. So the floor is yours to give your interventions on the topic. And if you have any queries over some of the issues that have been thrown on the table, that would be good as well.
Oh, okay. So I think my main queries and my main concerns have, of course, been they have been mentioned. Is, you know, the low ratification for the convention, because if we compare to other or similar conventions, you can see that there is quite a high level of or a higher level of ratification. So I was hoping that we'll be able to, you know, talk about why exactly this is so, because that can help us to develop some, you know, action plan around addressing this kind of lukewarm attitude, considering that data protection is now a global issue, not even a regional or national issue. So it is important to actually identify and understand what the barriers are to, you know, this ratification convention. Is it that the provisions are they not good enough? Is it that you know, like we normally is it the typical African attitude? You know, I mean, we know that we have quite a number of democratic governments. We also have a democracy. And a lot of the democracies don't want accountability. And this borders on accountability, on transparency, you know, is going to challenge governments' way of dealing with personal data. There are issues around surveillance and things like that. So is it that the governments of various African countries, are they afraid, if I may use that word, you know, is this about, you know, accountability shyness? You don't, all of a sudden you are going to have to be transparent, you are going to have to be accountable, you know, in how you handle personal data. And this is something that we know, you know, African leaders, African governments are not very good at accountability and transparency. And then, you know, I also would love us to look at the angle of, you know, the skills and capacity. Do we actually have, are we capable of, you know, implementing this convention? I know it's adopted in 2014, is 6 years old, but you know, technology grows really fast, and skills and understanding and law and policy and regulations don't necessarily grow, you know, at the same pace. So could it be that the skills and the knowledge gap is our wholesale adoption of this convention? Is it that we don't understand data protection? You know, earlier this week, I also participated in a data protection conference, and there are many issues coming up about how we understand privacy in Africa. Perhaps it's not we don't understand it as such a pressing issue as we should. But like I mentioned, it's important for us to see this not only from a national or regional perspective, but also from a global perspective. We are talking trans-border flows of personal data, transfer to and all that. So we can't really treat it in this, this narrow way of sometimes saying, oh, perhaps it's because we Africans are, we are so lax when it comes to privacy and so on, because data protection, like I always like to say to people, is a lot more than individual privacy. And perhaps the better we start to understand that, the better that we are able, the faster we'll be able to develop this area of law, regulation, policy, skills and so on. We'll be able to feel these skills better if we just thought for a while and said privacy is, purpose, is an important purpose. Well, there are issues, like I mentioned, of transparency, that comes along with that also. When organizations do it, there are issues, important issues of global trade. We are talking about the digital economy, to integrate fully into the digital economy and be reckoned with as, a bloc, the African bloc, or, in terms of respective or individual countries. If we don't get on board of kind of convention, and give it the traction that it needs. So, those are the things that I'm thinking about. Is the political will there? Are the skill sets there? And, do we really understand? Is there a right awareness about what this, what data protection is about? So quickly, I'm sorry if I'm taking a lot of time, but the second thing that I wanted to mention is also how perhaps this mention has some gaps also. I know at the beginning, Femi Daniel, he mentioned about, this is a 2014 convention, that it has some of what we could say are best practices, that those things have been imputed. But, I want to disagree a little with that and say a 6-year-old convention, but the technology is growing so fast that we can't, we can't really is now adequate for our purposes now. If you look at newer or recent data protection laws, you see, for example, increasing role of technology rather than even regulation, policy, and so on. So you see more roles being ascribed to technology in the regulatory framework for data protection. We'd have, the GDPR, the Council of Europe Convention, that's the Convention 108, all, now dealing or including provision to data protection by design and by default, data protection impact assessment, and, just helping us to achieve more regulatory compliance by integrating technology into the regulatory framework. And we don't find that in the convention. So it might be that somewhat as the years are rolling by, the convention is becoming slightly dated. And, when that's the perception, there's very little incentive to then go to that convention and use it as your threshold, use it as a threshold for developing the laws. And because even though that convention has 8 ratifications, there are about 30 or so data protection laws in the African continent. So if we have 35 countries, we have about 30 data protection laws. It doesn't really mean that the data protection laws in countries in the African continent, what it means is perhaps these countries are not seeing this as the correct threshold. And I have not studied all these laws in different African countries, so I don't know whether they are actually below the standard set by the convention or whether they have gone higher. And that can be the problem, because that exists. I think those, except that, I want to say African countries they are ratifying, they are signing a Council of Europe Convention, they are signing the Crime Convention, the Data Protection Convention, and then they are not signing and ratifying the Malabo Convention. And that should cause us to, we should actually cause an inquiry into this trend. So I think those are my comments. Sorry if I took up a little more time. Thank you.
Hello, thank you. Can I take the floor? Can I take the floor? Yes,
Auguste. Yes.
Hello?
We can hear you, Auguste.
Okay, thank you. I'm really in line with what Kemi Omotubora just said, and it will be very good for me if I can express my my opinion in French. But let's go into English. No problem. You see, what she said is very true. She said that maybe why the convention is still not ratified yet after 6 years adoption. Okay. First of all, let me know that this is common in AU. I mean, with the AU treaties and legal documents. And she's right, Kemi, when you say maybe it's typical African attitude. Yes, it's the typical African attitude, because a lot of conventions, international treaties, developed by the Commission is still yet on the way to be ratified. And this is not is not good, because it's the same head of states who adopt these documents. Is the same head of state who in 2010 in the summit, they said, okay, African Union, we send you on mission, go and work to bring a convention which is in line with our realities and our culture. So why then, in 2010, you send the Commission on mission to that? In 2014, the Commission came up with a document, a comprehensive document. As I told you, we went around the continent to get approval from each member state, from each regions, and we got it. So how can you explain that we come with this convention and they said, okay, we adopt it, and 6 years later it's not yet ratified, it's not yet come into force? Really speaking, even as Yankee, as Auguste, I'm still wondering why we don't have the political will, You want something, and when we finish, you say, okay, put it down, thank you, good work. That is not correct. So now, the decision makers should be, as Kemi said, should have the, I mean, maybe they don't want to be accountable and they don't want to be transparent, because these documents will bind them to respect the, I mean, their own words they said. So maybe because of that. Otherwise, I can tell you that even the Budapest Convention, the European Convention, is not so, I can say, comprehensive, because the Budapest Convention is focused on cybercrime. Why our convention, we put the personal data protection, we put on it also the e-transaction. You see, and we put also the promotion of the cybersecurity. You see, so what I can say here are the, I mean, they have a lack of proactivities, you see. And I can understand the African Union member state, because even the current issues, they are still struggling with them. So it's not something they may say, okay, this is not yet coming, so we can deal it with this later. I mean, our member state, they don't have the security culture, the culture of security. They used to say, maybe thanks God, or yes, thanks to God, nothing will happen. So the proactivity, they are not, I mean, in line with this. They still wait when they will have a problem, then they will react on this problem. This is not, I mean, the good attitude to have. That's why I'm fully agree with Kemi when she said maybe it's typical African attitude. Yes. Now I have three things to say. She was asking, maybe this, I can say, this awareness is not yet on board, maybe at the broader level, at the regional level, at the national level. I can say at the broader is already done, because now the African Union work closely with the Council of Europe to put in place a kind of awareness programs for African countries. They used to call it GLACI. GLACI, they do it, excuse me, I don't know this meaning. I don't want to mistaken here, but GLACI, and after that they have the GLACI Plus in collaboration with the African Union. Second, this is at the broader level. Second, at the regional level, I can say yes, because the AU has the Malabo Convention. No, I think as far as I'm concerned, is at the national level. We need to work on the awareness of the people. You see, I think it was Daniel who said that, what can you do for the to see the opportunities of the Malabo Convention for the ordinary people in Africa, is to raise the awareness of people that this convention exists. And second things, I think we also need to make the promotion of this convention. Why? Why is because it's our convention, but how? Is simply to put the provisions of the Malabo Convention into our national legislations. And I think the ECOWAS is the champions on that, because ECOWAS directive acts already consider the provision of the convention, and the ECOWAS Commission also invited already the 15 countries in the West Africa to also use and put this provision into the national legislations. So for me, I want to invite all the African Union member states to do the promotion of their own convention. Otherwise, it's not the European people who will come to do that because they have their own agenda. They have their own agenda. I can tell you here, in the Budapest Convention, they put something to protect the homosexual people. We in Africa is not in our culture, not yet. So they have their own agenda. So we cannot run to go and sign the Budapest Convention while we have the African Convention, which is aligned, allow me to use the same word, but which is aligned with our culture and our realities, you see. So we have to wake up. We have to make to raise awareness of our convention. Our convention exists. We have to do the promotion of this convention. We have at least, if we don't want to ratify yet, I don't know why, but we have to use the provisions of this instrument into our national legislation. Thank you.
Yes. Good afternoon, all. Can I have the floor, please? Is this a good time for Mr. Balogun to come in?
Yes.
Moderator. Hello.
Yes, I can hear you. Please proceed.
Hello.
We can hear you.
Yes. Good day to everyone. It's nice to join this event. The initial teaching period at the beginning can now be forgotten because of the interesting discussion. I mean, the event has come live finally, starting with Mr. Yankey, very good elaborative breakdown of the Malibu Convention. For people like us that have not really read it in and out before this event, Mr. Yankey was very quick with his presentation to bring us up to speed of what the convention is about. And then the second panelist, Dr. Kemi, coming in and trying to deduce the reasons why very few countries in Africa have ratified such a very nice convention. Then Mr. Yankee coming back and trying to see reason with trying to agree with some of the reasons. My name is Tunde Balogun, by the way. I'm the convener of Association of Licensed Data Protection Compliance Organization of Nigeria. I'm going to be basing most of my discussion around the uniqueness of data protection in Nigeria, and also married to the Malibu Convention, and also the Article 12 of United Nations Declaration on Rights to Privacy. First of all, the Malibu Convention, I'll be very honest, I didn't hear about it until about a week ago when I was told I was going to be joining this, I was going to be a panel on this event. Prior to that, I was very conversant with the United Nations Declaration on data privacy, the the Article 12 of the United Declaration on Human Rights, including the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights, the ICCPR, Article 17. Those are the two main United Nations documents that pretty much holistically covers anything to do with privacy of human beings all over the world. So it is a top-level document that protects, that covers cybersecurity and covers data protection. If the audience don't mind, I should just digress just a little bit, just so that we can really get our head around some of these terms, technological terms and phrases we're going to be using. Cybersecurity, data protection. And those are the two components when you're talking about privacy anywhere in the world. Yeah. Now, what are the basic differences in terms of impact? Cybersecurity, the impact of cybersecurity is on organizations, not individuals. So if there's a cybersecurity breach or whatever, it's probably going to be an organization that will be held responsible. And it's probably going to be an organization that will probably lose money, lose brand, get into trouble, get fined and all that. But the impact is on the organization. The damage is done to the organization mostly. For data protection, the impact is down to the individual, is to protect the rights to privacy of that individual. Then also talking about the Mr. Daniels as well, gave a very good broad and his own perspective on the Malibu Convention. And one area that Mr. Daniel mentioned that I would like to probably expatiate on is certification across the whole African country. Mr. Daniel mentioned that. Skill set, going beyond discussion on cybersecurity and data protection, how do we operationalize this thing for the average man across the African continent? After all these talks about the policies, the inadequacy of the policies, the inadequacy of the convention, some countries rectifying, and how does the average man in Africa, what does cybersecurity, what does data protection mean to him? We need to develop skill set in the terms of operationalizing. Dr. Kemi mentioned something with data protection and cybersecurity is that to operationalize it, you need technologies. Yeah. When you're operationalizing cybersecurity or data protection, and there's a shortfall, and you need to fix those shortfalls, it's technologies, not policies, that will be needed. Now, we need to develop the skill sets in terms of those technologies across Africa. That I would like to think that's what I would like to think Mr. Daniel was trying to mention on. So how do we operationalize this? Mr. Yankey talked about one of the advantages of Malibu Convention in comparison to international conventions like the Budapest Convention or even the United Nations ratifications on human rights is about that Malibu Convention captures our culture. Brilliant. That's very true about Malibu Convention. It localizes our culture on how African countries should go about cybersecurity and data protection. But at the same breath, we need to develop technologies that will fit our culture. So what I'm saying is that at the same time, the Malibu Convention frowns at us copying conventions from foreign shores. The same time that the technology in operationalizing cybersecurity and data protection to can't be copied from foreign shores, we have to develop our own indigenous tools in fixing some of the shortfalls in cybersecurity and data protections. What I mean by that is the average African has issues, has challenges in terms of understanding technology and literacy. What I mean by that is most African countries have a huge population of uneducated people, but those people have personal data. They've got a name, they mostly have addresses, and they've got sensitive data. Yeah? How do we protect the rights of those uneducated, those that can't give their consent because they can't read and write? Do you understand? Those that you want to collect their personal information, they can't read and write, and ask them to tick a consent box. What tools do we have? So those are the kind of challenges that practitioners of cybersecurity and data protection would have to come up with. At the end of the day, the way I can summarize is that we shouldn't, in Africa, we should not make cybersecurity. I think I mentioned this last week in an event I was in Abuja. We should not make it elitist. We should avoid making it elitist. And the way we can avoid making it elitist is that in terms of policy, in terms of operation, we should always have at the back of our mind that formulation of policies, development of tools, can it serve the average African cannot read or write. Immediately we start having policies and tools that captures the most uneducated and the most enlightened on the African continent, then those tools will naturally capture for the educated, for the urban people. So data protection and cybersecurity is a new ecosystem in Africa. It would be very nice if we don't allow it to be that we don't copy and paste from foreign shores. We need to look. We need to look at the way we do things in Africa. We need to look at our habits, our behaviors, and make sure that those two key industries regarding data privacy actually reflect those behaviors. I'll quickly also jump on to the issue about the low ratification of the Malibu Convention that have been strongly addressed by Dr. Kemi and Mr. Yankey. I mean, 30 countries already in Africa already have data protection law regulation. And then in comparison, you look at that and you've got less than 10 countries that rectify the convention. To me, I don't think that's really a big problem though. I think is, how would you put it? Half a dozen and 6, meaning the same thing. And what I mean by that is, what does the Malibu Convention say? The Malibu Convention says that African countries must have framework, cybersecurity framework and data protection framework to protect the privacy of their citizens. So if 30 countries have already fulfilled that criteria in Malibu Convention by having their own data protection law or regulation, but they've not rectified Malibu Convention, to me, they've done the right thing. They've followed the principle and the idea of Malibu Convention, even though they've not put their signatures to that convention. But if those countries already have laws and regulation, then I'll probably say they're even ahead of the Malibu Convention. That's my own opinion about it on that. Yes, and I'd also like to agree about what on the issue that Dr. Kemi and Mr. Yankee said about maybe one of the issues why we have low ratification of the Malibu Convention is knowing African leaders and not lack of accountability. I'm sure that reason was deduced by Dr. Kemi, and that was spot on. I would say my suspicions lie strongly in that you know, a lot of African countries were ruled by military dictators for a very long time, and most African countries, democracy is still new. And in most of these African countries that even practice democracy, democracy is still pseudo military. It's still is democracy covered in a military fashion. So you still got that military mentality in democratic jurisdiction in Africa. So because of that, that translates maybe to one of the reasons why there's low ratification on the Malibu Convention. But at the same breath, as I said, you've got 30 countries that have data protection law and regulation. In terms of awareness, I would talk about, before I go into awareness, sorry that I'm taking a bit of time. I'm talking about the Malibu Convention in relation to Nigeria. Well, in relation to Nigeria, Nigeria is, as I said, Nigeria is one of those countries that probably moved ahead of, that we have moved ahead of Malibu Convention, that we have a Nigerian Data Protection Regulation 2019 that was enacted. We're currently discussing the data protection bill, the draft bill for 2020, will be a full act of parliament, won't be subsidiary. So Nigeria have moved on beyond the Malibu Convention. And I probably would say that if the Malibu Convention would need any upgrade or would need any addition or any version, I think the Nigerian model should be taken with all humility. I think the Nigerian model should be taken into consideration or should be looked at by African countries. And I'll tell the audience what I mean by that. That uniqueness in Nigerian data protection regulation, that it creates a layer of licensed data protection compliance organization, a layer of firms that are experts that would help both public and private organizations implement data protection regime in Nigeria is a masterstroke. The issue about capacity and skill set that has been mentioned by previous speakers on this event, this is what the Nigerian model quickly corrects. It ensures that the expertise that you have firms that will be rewarded by investing in tools, in expertise, in data protection. And in that way, it professionalizes operationalization of data protection in Nigeria. So I think that model, and that's the reason why NDPR under 21 months in Nigeria, African countries come and look at the Nigerian model. We have Mr. Femi Daniel from NITDA and probably Dr. Olatunji and other people from NITDA here that they can testify to this. The performance report for NDPR was launched there last Friday, and the gains, what NDPR has achieved under 21 months, I think should be amplified across all other African countries. Nigeria should be proud of this and should be able to export this model. I think this model is very ideal for some of the challenges most other African countries might have. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I've just jotted a few things here. Another area that I would like to mention, I know we've got the Consumer Protection Council of Nigeria in attendance in this event. So I would like to bring the correlation between data protection and consumer rights across African countries, because there's a correlation. Why are all African countries countries all over the world coming up with data protection? As we rightly know, data is the biggest resource in the world. And when we mean resource, some other advanced countries are looking at data monetization. Even some African countries, where personal information are being traded, as long as trading of personal information are done within the confines of data protection in that jurisdiction. So there's the issue of data monetization where people's data can be sold. So that now comes to the issue of Consumer Protection Council, because now you're talking about trade in people's personal data, which is allowed, as I said, if data protection in that jurisdiction allows it. So that's another area where synergy has to be drawn in African countries between African countries' consumer protection councils or consumer protection authorities and data protection authorities or commissions across African countries. So that's another area that we need to look at. That's for now. I'll leave the floor to other people to have their say. If there's any other thing that comes up from other participants, then I'll come in. Thank you.
Can I speak? Can I take the floor? Hello? Hello?
Please feel free to.
Oh, okay. So I don't know if any of the panelists or any of our participants, the audience, if you have any comments on what we are discussing right now, if any of the panelists has any response to what Mr. Balogun has just said. But, I'll just, while I'm looking out for, make a few comments about something that's in what is said, that when since 30, 32, I don't really know the correct figures, I've seen 30 and 32 African countries now have data protection laws that precedes the convention. So I want to disagree slightly with that, because the purpose of the convention is to set, minimum standards and thresholds from where, that's the takeoff point. And like I said, while I was making my contribution time, that personally, I've not studied all these African, the laws from these different African countries, but I've seen a few. And what have disparity in approaches. Whereas if you have a convention, then you have a higher standard, you can make, provisions that, but you can't go beyond, I mean, you can't the threshold that is set by. So there's disparity, uniformity in how, the laws are developed. And we know that protection does not confine your processing to your territory or your national, or your jurisdictions. Oftentimes, flows of this personal data. So we need to have some uniformity in approach, and especially to have these different laws, standards that will at least be considered as best standards, globally. And, I'll give you an example. Under EU law, they used to have, the repealed Data Protection Directive. The directive being a directive, so that legislation allowed the different European countries to implement, the directive in their different ways. They have, some kind of control over how they implement the standards recommended. And, even though the EU is trading bloc is a market, you now find a situation where the laws are not uniform. It's doing different things, kind of, and they had this running for like 20 years until they thought, we can't read, we need a uniform approach. And that's when they brought data protection. Now, being a regulation, you have to transpose it into your national law just the way it is. There's no discretion, no opportunity, any changes, and so on and so forth. So now they have a uniform, national authorities can't change, like the direct, they can sort of do their different kinds of and our own context. I'll give the example of our Data Protection Authority. I mean, I think that point was raised point in time, but the audio was very bad. I could not follow. I think it was Mr. Femi Daniel that was trying to. So in most laws, including, the regional conventions, the national laws, international conventions, you find now that the standard is that there should be an independent data protection authority. So a situation where each country is doing its own thing and appointing any sector, any institution as a data protection authority, then it doesn't accord with best practice that is recommended across, a board of, all these relevant conventions. If you look at the Council of Europe Convention, the 108 clause, 2018, if you look at the GDPR, if you look at the United Nations, there's a guideline on data protection. If you look at the OECD guidelines, if you look at the Malabo Convention that we are talking about, there's, necessity to provide for the independence of the data protection. And in fact, if we are not careful and we look at it very seriously and, very critically, we can begin to question this approach that we are lauding as so excellent. This is the data protection, the DPCOs, okay? Because under the Convention, there are some strict provisions about who should actually be involved in auditing and have been a sworn official of the data protection. So actually, in terms of implementing that particular provision, we will say that our bar is lower rather than higher. And so this is where all this, this is where standards comes in that, you know, its own data protection law, and we comply in terms of we call the letters of the law. So you are, yes, that's a good thing. We do have a law, but what is in that? How does it meet the standards that we actually want to promote? I think that's the fundamental question. That's so, you know, Nigeria has done well that we have gone this far, but I think that there are issues around the standard we are now that we still need to fine tune, and we still need better. Something, you know, I mean, it was written by an who tend to be, you know, sometimes academic tune aspects of all these things. Instead, that if you don't have an independent data protection authority, if you don't have, that is an act of the, like an act of the National Assembly establishing your data protection hall of shame. So we need to think about this seriously, and, you know, think about our standards, where we are, how good it is, and then how to move, you know, beyond what we are presently doing. So, you know, for that would be, this convention is still ready, and why it should be ratified, because we need to know what the individual countries are in terms of the standard that the laws are setting. I don't know if anybody else has any comments or regarding these.
Yes, please. Can I come in? Can I have the floor for just a few minutes, please?
Hello?
Hello, can I have the floor, please? This is Mr. Balogun.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, yes, sorry, just in response to what Dr. Kemi said about standard. Now, data protection standard, where is the benchmark? Where is the baseline? Is the baseline with Malibu Convention? Is the baseline, and when I mean the baseline for standard. So where should we use? Where should countries in the world that want to formulate their own data protection law, should they be looking at? So I'm talking about African countries now. So let's localize everything. So we're talking about African countries now. The remaining ones are the ones that want to improve on their data protection regulation or law. So what should they be using as standard? Should they be Malibu Convention? Should they be Articles 12 of the United Nations Human Rights Record pertaining to, because most data protection, including EU GDPR, including the Estonia Data Protection Law, which is the oldest in the world, they all stem from the United Nations Convention, Article 12 and Article 17. Yeah, that is where, because that's where everything starts from. That's the primary Malibu Convention. You do a mapping from Malibu Convention to the United Nations Article 12 and 17. And you say that Malibu Convention is just more detailed, more granular version of those United Nations article. Data protection is data protection anywhere in the world, as defined in the United Nations, yeah? Right to privacy. It's got nothing, fine, you might have peculiarities in different countries, but holistically, data protection is data protection. Right to privacy, people have right to their privacy. It doesn't matter what religion, it doesn't matter what country you are. And that's what the United Nations Article 12 and 17 covers. Okay, now, what I would like to assume is that Malibu Convention is now taking into consideration the peculiarities we have across all the 54 African countries and trying to come up with cybersecurity and data protection regulation, bringing in those peculiarities. Saying that some African countries' laws are inadequate or they are not up to standard to the Malibu Convention or whatever, then we're speaking with both sides of the mouth. If the industry is saying that, you know what, as long as you have the basic principles of data protection and cybersecurity in your local law, the basic principles, as in data protection, as we say, the principle of data protection, which is the legal component in the data protection regime, the principles of data protection. As long as those principles are well captured, then the finer details, of your data protection law in any country should be able to capture the uniqueness of those countries. So we should be very careful when we start saying some data protection in one country doesn't meet a certain standard. We need to be very careful when we're doing that. At the same breath, I know there's some international organizations that have ways that they grade data protection laws across different countries. And going back to what Dr. Semi said, NDPR, I repeat again, NDPR was graded as moderate by the Piper Global Rating Body for all data protection, which is very decent. There are a lot of advanced first world countries that their data protection law was graded as red, which was weak. So I would say this anywhere, and I would defend NDPR. The NDPR, for what it is a very, very decent data protection law. The draft data protection bill is an improvement from NDPR because it takes into consideration what we've all been saying at this event, and also agrees with the Malibu Convention, which is the best practice that all countries must have an independent data protection authority. The data protection bill is an improvement for NDPR because it takes this into consideration. So we need to be very careful. Then talking about why we have, sorry, just a minute, please. I just want want to make reference to the African trade, the African continental free area. Hello?
If you could just round up where we actually out of time already, we're over 10 minutes short of time.
Okay, I'll round up. So in terms of the reason why countries, African countries can be talking about the African Free Trade Zone, which is the hottest thing that all African presidents are meeting regularly in Rwanda, talking about creating a free trade zone among the all African countries. So when they're talking about that, you can't be talking about that if you don't have data protection law in those across most African countries. And what would happen again is that when it comes to electronic transaction, African countries that have the best data protection law would, most of those electronic transaction and trade will go to those countries. So if Nigeria has the best data protection law amongst all the 54 African countries, then if two organizations want to trade electronically between Nigeria and Uganda, they'll probably say, you know what, our data protection contract under this transaction will be based on the Nigerian data protection law because it's the best among all the. So it creates room for competition. It creates room for African countries to make sure that their data protection law is adequate enough. Those without inadequate laws will lose out to African countries. I love competition that have good, adequate laws. So I'll rest my discussion on that. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Allow Dr. Omotubora just a round up as we close this panel session.
So yeah, thank you. The essence of this kind of conversation is to get the point of, and have people weigh in from different perspectives. So happy that you so strongly. Can I just ask if Mr. Yankey has any, do you have any close? Hello?
Hello? For me,
yes,
I just want to say thank you for this opportunity you're giving to me to talk about the convention. I know that for this time is very, very urgent that we start again our awareness tour, meaning that we need to go, if it's not in each country, but we need to go in each region to raise awareness of not only our national experts, but also the public in general. So thank you very much for this opportunity. And I really, really, really encourage you to continue in this way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Yankey. Ronke is there, no? Mr. Daniel, is Mr. Daniel here?
Hi, Kemi, I'm back. Yes.
Yes. You're welcome. You want?
Thank you so much. Well, what I'd like to say is, enormous thank you, to the panel for such engaging discussions. Fantastic. Thank you as well to Mr. Yankey for his contribution and the very detailed presentation, which I know will be circulating, afterwards to participants. Very much looking forward to tomorrow's sessions as well, which, whilst we will not be panelists or moderators, we'll still be participants in, and we'll carry the conversation forwards. Do any of the other panelists have any remarks?
Can we officially close the panel's session now? Do you say any last words? I think Mr. Olumide has left this building already, and Mr. Bidemi, I'm not sure he's still available right now. So I'd like to appreciate every one of you on this panel. Thank you very much, Mr. Yankey, for your time. Thank you very much, Mr. Tunde Balogun. Thank you, Mr. Olufemi Daniel. Thank you, Mr. Olumide. And of course, thank you very much to our moderators, Mr. Captains, and Dr. Kemi Omotubora. So we're going to break at this point. I will actually overshot our time by about 10 minutes already. So we're actually supposed to start the next session by 12:20, but we'll push it a bit forward. We'll take networking and advertisements for about 10 minutes. So on your panel, on your dashboard, if you look at the left side of the screen, you'll see it's networking. Then you actually click the networking session, and you have the opportunity to interact with other participants and just basically networking as well. So we'll take a 15-minute break now, and we'll be back here by 12:45, or 17 minutes actually. We'll be back here by 12:45 to begin the second panel session. This time around, we'll be discussing comparative review of the regulations/administration of personal data protection and cybersecurity laws and jurisdictions in Africa. Then from the best, we encourage the economy, and we have I shall see that there's a paper presenter. We have Olumide, we have Advocate Nancy Makula, and we have Mr. Olumide Balogun as well of this panel session. So when we return after the break, thank you so much for staying tuned, and trust and having a great time so far. Once again, we apologize for all the technical difficulties so far, and surmounting most of those challenges. And we're sure we're going to go as a person. Thank you very much, everyone. See you at 12:45. 12:45 p.m. and here, that is Lagos time, please. I understand we're broadcasting all over Africa right now. So 12:45 Lagos time, please. Lagos time. So that's about 16 minutes from now. Thank you.